Is something wrong with the system? Michael Levine killed a man, but he's out on the street thanks to the insanity plea. Was he ever crazy or crazy like a fox? Crime Crisis, The Insanity Defense. Forrest Sawyer, Day 1, Monday at 8, 7 Central.
You're about to see a hidden camera investigation into a drug problem you may not be aware of. Teenagers and steroids. Up to 500,000 kids in this country are not only pumping iron, they're also pumping themselves full of these dangerous chemicals. And many of them don't even play sports. As you're about to see, although steroids are illegal, they're easily smuggled into the United States. And as Judd Rose discovered, once the kids get them, they don't seem to care about the risks until it's too late.
Growing up, Jamie Fuller was a skinny weakling, a runt, and then he got juiced.
I started using steroids in the 8th grade when I was 14 because I always got picked on when I was little by kids.
Juice, the bodybuilders call them, anabolic steroids. A synthetic version of the male hormone testosterone. They're taken either orally or injected into the rear end with one of these huge needles. Either way, when taken in large doses, they promote the rapid growth of muscle tissue. In other words, steroids can turn a runt into a hulk.
I felt good until I started coming off them. I was real depressed. I got mood swings. I'd hit my friends. I'd hurt people in my family. I'd yell a lot. Punched holes in my walls when I was mad.
These uncontrollable outbursts of anger are a common side effect of steroid use called roid rage. One day in 1991, Jamie, then 16, went to pick up his 14-year-old girlfriend, Amy Carnevale. He was upset. He believed Amy was cheating on him. So they went to his house, and there...
I grabbed a knife out of my drawer. She came out of the bathroom. I didn't look at her. I couldn't look at her. I don't want to talk about what happened after that. I'm too disgusted with myself.
And for good reason. Jamie took Amy for a walk in the woods, and there he stabbed her 10 times. Stabbed her so hard, the knife almost went right through her. Today, he blames the juice.
I didn't think it'd ruin my life, but here I am, sitting in jail, facing a life sentence. I'll probably be sent to jail for life for steroids.
Fuller was right.
The jury finds the defendant guilty of murder.
Shortly after we spoke, he was sentenced to life without parole. But the verdict was in on steroids long before the Jamie Fuller case. Everyone remembers Canadian sprinter Ben Johnson stripped of a gold medal after testing positive at the '88 Olympics. And NFL star Lyle Alzado dying of a brain cancer that he blamed on his use of juice. What hasn't grabbed the headlines is how steroids have become the drug of choice for a growing number of kids who want to bulk up as big and as fast as possible. And it's not just student athletes either. It's all kinds of kids. Neil Carlin counsels steroid users at Bryland Hospital in Buffalo.
Are we talking about an epidemic or just a minor problem?
Somewhere between 5 and 8% of the students who complete high school in this country have tried anabolic steroids.
5 to 8%?
5 to 8%.
Which means as many as 500,000 kids. Steroids actually have legitimate medical uses, like treatment of anemia and some forms of cancer. Using or selling them for any other purpose is a federal crime. But there's a thriving black market that authorities estimate sells $400 million a year in illegal steroids. And there are an estimated 1 million Americans who use them. And many of them began using before they were 16. Where do they get the stuff? Assistant U.S. Attorney Phil Halpern, who's handled more steroid cases than any other federal prosecutor, says some is smuggled in from Europe or Canada, but...
If you look at the statistics, usually about 75% or 80% of all apprehensions at the border come from the Mexican border. The major part of the problem posed by smuggled anabolic steroids in this country come from Mexico.
There are thousands of pharmacies to be found in Mexican border towns. In fact, many Americans rely on these Mexican pharmacies as a source of prescription drugs that they can buy at a fraction of the price back home. But many of these pharmacies also sell steroids. Now, under Mexican law, a prescription is necessary to buy them. But Americans who come here shopping for steroids consider that law a joke. and we quickly found out why. We went to Rosarito Beach, a resort town about an hour's drive from San Diego, and there we chose a drugstore at random. Inside, with our hidden camera, I asked the pharmacist for anabolic steroids. He asked for a prescription. I said I didn't have one, so the druggist told me to come back later when a doctor would be there.
Okay.
I returned after 20 minutes. The doctor was in.
Yeah, he's there now.
Should we just go?
You have to go with this guy right here back.
Around the side?
Yeah, around here. Back on the front.
So I went around back where the doctor promptly wrote me a prescription for 8 doses.
Can I get more than one prescription?
You want one prescription for your name, other prescription for other name.
The other name, okay. All right.
Different name.
As many as I wanted, $10 a pop. I left with 4 prescriptions under 4 different names, returned to the drugstore, and got what I came for, no questions asked.
The list what we have.
The last of it?
It's pretty popular, huh? Well, I still get it now, though.
While not all Mexican pharmacies sell steroids, roughly half of those we picked at random did. At one of them in Tijuana, our producer bought some without even being asked for a prescription.
Do they really search when you're going across the border? No problem. For it? Yeah. No problem.
Well, of course, it is a problem. You're smuggling a controlled substance into the U.S. But the pharmacist volunteered to show our man exactly how to do that.
Yeah, Rambo.
The minute the pharmacist helps you smuggle the steroids, he's assisting in the violation of an American law, and he's somebody that we can target.
This is where the so-called Mexican connection starts. It ends in cities and towns across America, at the local gym or the high school locker room, in the veins of boys like these 3. Teenagers from the Chicago area, they agreed to tell us about their steroid use on condition we disguise their identities. Tony's a typical user, white, middle class, and male, a jock. He's on juice.
For performance, mainly.
Is it that important to you to be good at football?
Yeah. I love the game.
Since 1971, the average weight of the top high school football players has gone from roughly 250 to nearly 300 pounds. Amazingly, that's about 20 pounds more than the average player weighs in the NFL. The message isn't lost on kids like Tony. Use steroids.
So many other players are doing them. You see what it does to them. You know, it gets them bigger and faster. You got to compete with these guys, so I take them too.
Unlike the pros, only a handful of high schools test for steroids. Those that do usually do it just once a year and test only football players. But as we noted before, it's not just jocks. Over a third of the teens who use juice aren't even on a high school team. Like Kevin, who was 15 when he began.
When I used to look at myself, I used to be disgusted of how I looked. Now I look at myself and I say, oh my God, I can't believe I got that big, and it's just unbelievable.
When he started last spring, Paul weighed 165 pounds. Now he's 192.
I'll be the first one on the beach to take off my shirt. I mean, I go into the water, and I guess, you know, people looking, you know, you walk by and they'll look at you. And that feeling, you know, it's just the best feeling. Almost as good as having sex. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Just as well, since Paul might find it difficult to have sex, he's suffering from one of the most common side effects of steroid use.
The testicles shrinking. I mean, you could tell that the testosterone is just being pulled from them, and that scares me.
Fact is, all 3 boys suffer from one or more major symptoms of steroid use, including shrunken testicles, roid rage, and severe acne. Other juicers start to go bald and, in some cases, develop abnormally large female-like breasts. And that's just in the short term.
You're just not going to be able to have children long term. You're going to develop liver cancer long term. You're going to develop testicular cancer, prostate cancer long term.
What do steroids do for you that you're willing to risk your health and, in some cases, your life?
The way I look, my confidence, it was very, very important to me. I could go outside right now and, you know, drive home. I might get hit by a car and die anyways. So the chances, they're equal.
That sort of attitude is no surprise to Dr. Bob Goldman, head of the National Academy of Sports Medicine.
I did a survey back in the early 80s, and I asked 198 world-class athletes, and I said, if I had a magic pill you took, for 5 years you'd win everything, no matter what you wanted to do. One small catch, though, at the end of the 5 years you would die. Would you still take that pill? 52% said yes.
Ironically, even when they develop huge muscles, many juicers are still unhappy with their bodies. It's a sort of reverse anorexia.
The anorexic looks in the mirror and says, I'm fat. I'm too big at 100 pounds. The anabolic steroid-using person, I'll call him the anabolic steroid addict, at 280 pounds, deadlifting 750, 800 pounds, says, I'm not big enough.
So we're talking about more a mental addiction than a physical one.
We're talking about both a psychological and a physiological addiction.
Indeed, those who try to stop often go through a narcotic-like withdrawal and a crippling depression that in many cases has led to suicide. In addition to the suicides that are believed to be steroid-related, there are troubling reports of teenage bodybuilders with no previous medical problems who are suddenly dropping dead from heart attacks or strokes. Many doctors believe steroids are to blame for that, too. No matter how dangerous steroids are, many teens simply refuse to believe it. But they live in a society that sends them mixed messages, where the biggest movie star is a former bodybuilder who used to take steroids, where the most pumped-up pros in sports score the greatest rewards. A society that prizes winners and encourages kids to do whatever it takes to be one. So it's no surprise that our children believe bigger is better and only learn too late that with steroids, the bigger they are, the harder they fall.
Kids are probably going to sit home, watch this, and say, oh, that's not going to happen to me. Don't wait for it to happen to you, because when it does, you'll be sorry for it.
Many parents never suspect steroid use because they don't know what to look for. Some signs. A teenager who gains a lot of weight over a short period of time or begins to have violent mood swings. And another example of how pervasive these drugs are, just today, the owner of the World Wrestling Federation, Vince McMahon, was indicted on charges of conspiring to beef up his wrestlers with anabolic steroids.
In a moment, parents, stay tuned. We have more information about keeping your child safe when Prime Time continues.